In this video, we're going to build this award wreath animation using Apple Motion. And of course, if you are a Patreon member, you can download the finished project and use it directly inside of Final Cut Pro right now. Go ahead and open up Motion. From the project browser, I'm going to suggest you select the Final Cut title so you can use this over and over again. Then under your preset, set these settings to whatever you typically like to work with in Final Cut Pro. That's just going to give you the best possible idea of the end animation. You can set your duration to whatever you like, and then from there, we'll push open. Firstly, we need to delete the type text here and background layers. Next, we need to create our leaves. So we're going to come down here to our Bezier tool. Clicking this down arrow will actually select the B-spline tool. From there, we'll create 4 different points. So I'm just going to start relatively close to the center, then we'll create a second point, a third point, a fourth point, and then we'll close it off. Now what's cool about the B-spline tool is if I push Command and click and drag on one of these points, I can actually sharpen up that point. So we can shape these leaves in whatever way we want. So I want the ends of them to be super pointy, maybe not all the way, but very close. And then we can have a more rounded base here. This is about the shape I'm going to use for my leaf. It doesn't super matter, and you can always change it later on if you're not happy with the end result. With our leaf in place, head over to your inspector on the left side, then select your properties and find the position parameter. Right-clicking on the position parameter will select reset parameter so it's directly in the center. Next, we're going to come down here to our tools and we'll select the anchor point tool. I'm going to move this anchor point to the bottom left corner of our leaf. This makes it really easy to rotate around this pivot point. From there, let's head over to our group and rename everything so we know what we're looking at. Let's just rename this to be single leaf. Then we'll rename the entire group leaf group. With the leaf group selected, head up to your filters. We'll go to distortion. And we're going to select the mirror effect. This is going to make it really easy to create 2 leaves without having to replicate all of the steps. Now that we have the mirror effect though, you'll notice a problem. We have this bounding box around our leaf, which is cutting off the mirror effect as we move the mirror effect around. So what we need to do is make sure that our leaf group is selected, head over to our group, and find this fixed resolution checkbox. Checking that is going to expand the bounding box to the full project size. And that means that now we can take our single leaf, head over to our properties and adjust the Y value, and we can separate these 2 leaves out to give them some space. You can give them as much space as you like. I recommend that they're almost touching. Then we can go over to our rotation and we can drag this up and down, and you'll notice that that gives us the ability to fan out our leaves. So let's fan them out to a place where we're happy, and that is looking really nice. So we've created our leaf. We need to start building out our wreath. To create the wreath, go ahead and collapse your leaf group and then select it. And you should notice that your anchor point is floating above your 2 leaves. We want this anchor point to be directly in the center of both the leaves. This is just going to make our lives a bit easier. So we'll just drag that down so it's right in the middle. Ensuring that your leaf group is selected, go ahead and head up to your Replicate tool. Once we've done that, we've created a lovely mess for us to work with, and all we need to do is head over to the left side under Shape and change it from Rectangle to Geometry. Now, right now, we don't have any geometry to work off of, so it's going to look exactly as it did before. So what we'll do is rename our group to just be the Wreath group. Then selecting our replicator, let's head over to our properties and right-click on the position and reset the parameter. This is going to place our leaves directly in the middle, which is going to be really important if we want these replicators to work well. Now that we've done that, head down to your shape tools and clicking this down arrow next to the rectangle, select your circle tool. I'm going to click and drag and hold shift, and this will allow us to create a perfectly symmetrical circle. Now that I have that created, let's head over to our position parameter, right-click, and select reset parameter so it's right in the middle. From there, we'll head to our shape settings, and we'll disable the fill, then enable the outline. Just for visual sake, I'll go ahead and drag up the width on that outline so we can clearly see what's going on. Then we'll head over to the Geometry tab, and we're going to convert this circle over to points. From there, we'll go ahead and just click Convert on this dialog window. And now, if you take a close look, you should see these small red points all around your circle, which gives us complete control over the shape of the circle. What's really cool is we can go ahead and disable this option to close the circle and then select this point on the far left and delete it. And just like that, we have a perfect semicircle. With our semicircle in place, let's head over to the style and you'll locate the brush type. I want it to start really thick at the bottom of the branch and then get really thin at the very top. So to do that, let's change the brush type from solid to airbrush. Then you might notice that this line has actually gotten quite soft around the edges, and that is because we have this brush profile. Go ahead and expand that and just click and drag the black part of this brush profile off, and you'll see that we now have a solid line. From there, we can go up to our stroke settings, and you'll see this option for width over stroke. Go ahead and expand that out. Now our circle is starting up here at the very top. You can see control point 1 is the very top of it. So let's find control point 1 here in our width over stroke, and let's just set that to a value of 0 using this slider. So now our circle starts off super thick and then slowly gets thinner and thinner. Now that we have our perfect semicircle, let's go ahead and select our replicator, and we're going to drag our circle into the geometry shape source here in this little drop zone. Immediately, you should start to see all of your leaves are taking shape around our circle. Now, if your leaves are not perfectly lined up on this circle, this can mean two different things. Either your replicator is not at position 0, 0, or your leaf group, which we created earlier, doesn't have an anchor point directly at the center here. So if I were to take the anchor point and drag it off, you'll notice that my leaves are floating way off to the right side. So it's important to have that anchor point right at the middle. With our leaves surrounding our circle, we'll head to the replicator settings, and we can go to the replicator. And now we can really start to shape this wreath. For example, we can drag up the number of points. We can adjust the offset, which will be really important in just a bit. Coming down here, we're going to find this checkbox for align angle. That means that as the circle goes around, these leaves will slowly adjust their orientation. But right now they're all pointing towards the center, and that's obviously not what we want. So what we'll do is come over here to the angle settings and drag that up until the leaves are pointing in the correct direction. Now that they're pointing in the right direction, let's adjust our number of points, getting that to look really nice, maybe around 12 or 13. We can also change the build style, which is super important for our animation because right now, the animation is going to start from the top and move in a clockwise order. And we want these to grow from the base of our stem up towards the top. So let's change it from clockwise over to counterclockwise. Now that we've done that, we can come down to the scale settings and we can adjust the overall scale of everything. Then on the scale end, we can drag that down to 0. Now you're going to immediately notice something funky happening here, and that is that we have a mega leaf at the top, even though we have the smaller leaves right next to it. That is because our offset is set to 0%. So let's just go ahead and adjust this offset until you get one of these larger leaves near the bottom with the small leaves at the top. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and adjust the points a little bit more, getting it a little bit thicker on the branch. I'm really liking how this is looking, so I think we can start to move on to the animation element. To do that, let's select the semicircle that is containing all of the leaves, and then we'll go up to our behaviors, shape, and then we're going to select right on. Now, motion thinks the first point is here at the top, so you'll notice that as it draws on, it's starting there at the top, and we don't want that. To change this, let's change our direction from forward over to reverse, and now it should start from the base. We also don't want it to take quite so long, so let's just move in about 1 second, and with the right on parameter selected, push O, and that should trim it out and set the out point. And actually that might even be a little bit slow. Let's try 15 frames. I'm on a 30 frame timeline, by the way. So that would be about half a second. Now that we've done that, we can go over to our speed settings, and it's currently set to constant, which is just not very pleasing in animation. So let's change it over to something like ease both and see how that animation plays out, and I'll even hide the replicator. That's looking super nice. So now that we have our circle drawing on, we can start to animate the actual replicator itself. And fortunately, Motion has a super easy way to do this with sequence replicators. Selecting your replicator, we can go up to behaviors, go down to replicator and select sequence replicator. So essentially we're telling Motion the sequence of events that we want to happen to the replicator, and that's going to give us an animation. From there, we can go over to the left side under our parameter, and we want these to start from a scale of 0 and slowly grow into their final form. So let's go to add, select scale, and then we can drag the scale down to 0. Now, our sequencing is currently set to 2, which means that over time it's going to start to shrink down to 0%. So let's change it from to over to from, and now it will start at the bottom and slowly grow up to the top. Again, we need to start to add some speed and easing to this. The easiest way to add speed is to just simply shorten our sequence replicator. So let's go in about 1 second. And with the sequence replicator selected, we'll push O to set an out point, and the animation is a lot faster. Next, we want to add some easing to it. So let's drag up the spread to around 5, and we'll change our traversal from constant over to ease in and out. And now the animation looks so much smoother. I absolutely love how that looks. Now, before we duplicate this over, I want to add in just a bit of variation to these leaves. They're all pointing in the exact same direction. So if we head to our replicator settings, we could adjust stuff like the scale randomness if you want some of them to be slightly larger or smaller than you would expect. You can also adjust the angle end, so we could offset how the angle will appear over time. And I also like to adjust the angle randomness, which is just going to give us a little bit of variability and make it look that much more natural. This is going to come down to if you want it to be a more naturally appearing wreath or if you want it to look super professional and pristine. Once you are happy with the end result, it's time to duplicate this over. So let's go ahead and select our wreath group. We'll go to our properties, ensuring that the position is 0, 0. We should be good. We can go ahead and collapse that group, and I'm going to right click, create a new group, and this is just going to be the mirror effects group, and we'll drag our wreath directly into that group. Now that I've done that, let's select our wreath and make sure that fixed resolution under our group settings is checked. And let's find our mirror effects group, go to filters, distortion, and we'll look up the mirror effect. And just like that, you should have a perfectly replicated shape on both sides. Now, you could move this control point left and right, but you're noticing that that's kind of offsetting the right side, and we don't want that. So instead of adjusting this point, we could actually go to our wreath settings, and we'll go to our properties and adjust the Y value. And now you can see that we're separating them apart, and they are staying exactly the same distance apart, which is nice. I'm also noticing that we're getting a little bit of the edges cut off here on the bottom, so let's just fix that really quick. We'll select both the circle and the replicator that has all of the leaves, and we'll just drag down the scale a little bit, and that's going to get it directly inside of our project without cutting off any of the edges. You might even want to adjust the rotation if you want to open it up a little bit more. And if you want to make the rotation really easy, you could actually just drag the anchor point of this down to the base of your wreath, so now we can rotate out from there. And that is going to give us a perfect result every time. So we could just unfurl that a bit. So with both sides replicated, we can push play and see this elegant wreath animation play out, which I am really loving. Let's add in some simple text, and let's also create a whole new group for this so that it's not getting replicated in the mirror effects group. We'll just call this the titles. And with our title tool selected, let's go ahead and type in something. And then we can go ahead and change the font and alignment on this. So let's just drag up the scale, alignment, and I'm going to select the Academy Engraved. And now that we've got our title, let's head over to our properties and we'll just click on this position and reset it so it's right in the middle. Maybe we're not quite happy with that positioning, so let's just drag that up till we are. And I want the 2025 to be super big, so let's just select that with our text tool, and then we can expand the scale on that a little bit. Maybe we want to select all of them and adjust the line spacing so they're a bit closer together. Now, what's awesome about Motion is all of the built-in animations that it has, so let's head on up to our behaviors. We'll go to Text Basic, and we'll select something like Blur In, and we can move this over until after the wreath has been drawn in. Maybe we want it to be a little bit slower in its animation, and that's looking great. I know this tutorial has already gone on really long, but really stick with me because we're going to get into some super fun techniques here next. That being said, if you're enjoying this style of Apple Motion content, you may want to check out my Apple Motion Masterclass, which has over 8 hours of in-depth training, plus some exclusive live streams and some bonus videos. Takes you from knowing nothing all the way to being able to use Apple Motion in your everyday life. I do have a special sale going on right now for the end of the year, so make sure you check that out. So what I want to add next is some particle leaves flying off of our wreath. I think it's going to look super cool. So to do that, let's go ahead and find our leaf group and expand that out. So we have just our single leaf that we created way early on in this tutorial. With that single leaf selected, let's select Make Particles in the top right. Now, it's going to be a mess because we are replicating off of this group, the leaf group, and the emitter is found inside of that group. So let's just drag that emitter out of that up here to the top, and we can actually just create its own new group. And we'll just call this the leaf emitter group. Now by default, motion hides the original layer you created the replicator from, so make sure you just go ahead and enable that. Let's select the emitter, and we'll change the shape from point over to image, and that image is actually going to be the wreath that we've created. So we'll just drag in our mirror effects group to the image source, and now motion knows that that's where the particles want to be generated from. Things might be offset here, so we just need to make sure that everything is set up as it should be. With our emitter selected, let's go to our properties and make sure that the position is directly in the center. That is just going to make sure that the leaves only come off of our wreath. Next, in our emitter settings, let's change the arrangement from tile fill over to random fill. So that means the particles can come from absolutely anywhere. And let's drag the emission alpha cutoff all the way up to 100%. So that means that if there's an area that has transparency to it, it will not be able to emit a leaf. We could also check this box to make it 3-dimensional if we want to, so that means it can go off in any direction, which I tend to like. Then coming further down, let's drag up the speed randomness slider, and let's also adjust the spin. We'll drag that up a little bit, and the spin randomness. Then let's change the opacity over life. So I wanted to start from nothing, so let's just take the opacity, drag that to 0. Then we want it to slowly fade in, so let's add another control point, drag the opacity up to 100, and then we want them to slowly fade off. So let's go to the very end and drag that opacity back down to 0. Next, we want to adjust the scale. Right now they are way too big, so let's just take this scale parameter and drag it way down. And I actually really like how this small leaves appear. I think that looks really nice. And let's drag up the scale randomness so that they aren't all the same size. And let's just get some playback and see how this is looking. We're getting a few leaves here and there, nothing crazy. We might want to drag up the birth rate amount. And let's also adjust the speed randomness, I think. Plus, let's also adjust the scale. I still feel like they're a little bit too large, so we'll just drag that down even further. So those particles are looking all right, but I want to add some more character to them, almost like they're getting caught up in the wind and blown around. To do that, let's go ahead and selecting this emitter. We'll go up to our behaviors, we'll go to simulations, and let's select orbit around. And I wanted to orbit around the text that we've added in the center here. So let's just drag in our title right to this object, and now it knows that we want the leaves to go around that. We could adjust the strength of it and the influence amount. And we also wanted to include the Z direction, I think. And let's see how that's looking. And I think that's looking super cool. Maybe it's a little bit too fast, so let's just drag that strength down a little bit. And I am loving that. I think that adds a lot to this particular effect. Now that we've got our animation in place, I want to finally color all of this and add a nice sheen to it. To do so, let's select all of our layers, and I'm actually just going to move them up a little bit positionally, and maybe even scale them down a little bit. And that's looking good. Now let's select these top 3 groups. I'm going to right click and select group. And now that we've created this group, let's rename this group to be FX. And from there, we can go up to our filters, and I want to add in a nice color filter to this. So we'll go to stylize and select fill. This is going to completely tank performance with the particles. So for the remainder of this tutorial, I'm going to disable particles and then re-enable it at the end. So let's go ahead and disable the leaf emitter group. And from there, we'll make sure that the fill is selected and we can change it over to gradient. Now that should give me these gradient control points. So I'm just going to drag these to spread them out over the entire wreath. And I want them to appear golden. So let's go over to our gradient settings. And I'm going to completely remove one of these colors. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to set up the golden color. Now that that's removed, by clicking and dragging it off, we'll select the first color point. And let's just get it over to that gold spectrum. We want it to be maybe a little bit more yellow, maybe slightly less saturated. So we'll just get that kind of closer to the center. That's looking pretty good there. With our first control point, we can go ahead and add in another control point. And I want this to be brighter, so we'll just drag it closer to the center, like that, like it's getting hit by some light. And finally, let's add one last control point, and I want this to be the identical golden color that we have here at the top. So let's go ahead and select that first control point and just click and drag this color to that color swatch. So now they should match. and we should have this nice golden sheen here in the center. Next, I want to make it look almost like it is metal. So to do that, let's go to our effects. We'll go to our filters. We'll go to stylize and select add noise. Now that we've got this noise, we can head over here, change the type from white noise over to Gaussian noise. We'll set it to monochrome. We'll change the blend mode to overlay, and we're going to disable auto animate. So I'm going to really drag this up so you can see the texture taking place here, but you'll see how that's kind of giving it a nice metallic texture to it, which I really, really like. I'll undo that. I like how the base looks with the noise at 0.33, but we can add one more filter to really make this look metal. So let's go up to our filters, then we'll go down to stylize, and this time we're going to select indent. And now if you take a look at all of those noise points that we created, it's almost adding a 3D dimension to them, which I really like. So we can adjust stuff like the softness of this. We'll go ahead and drag that back there. Maybe bring up the brightness so it's a little bit more metallic. There's the ambient light, which you can drag up. The highlight brightness, so we can really make those points pop. The highlight sharpness, and I like to bring this one up pretty high. There we go, that's looking good. We can even adjust the light rotation, so if you want to adjust where that light is coming from. And finally, the depth on this effect. And that's looking nice and metallic. Last but not least, I want to add a sweeping sheen across it. Let's go ahead and create a whole new group, and we'll drag this group above everything, and we'll call this the sheen group. From there, let's go down to our shapes and get the rectangle tool and just create a basic rectangle shape like so. From there, we'll go to our shape settings and drag the feather up like crazy. If you feel like that's too wide, you can go into your size settings and just back off the width a little bit. That's looking pretty good to me. Now with this rectangle selected, we'll right click and select add image mask. And then we're going to use our effects group as the mask driver. So I'll go ahead and do that and everything will vanish. That's because motion automatically disables the primary layer. So let's just check that and it should be back. And what's cool now is we can take our rectangle, and if I move it over the top, you'll see that we're getting this nice shine on everything. So what we're going to do to animate this is I'll go to my properties, maybe adjust the rotation a little bit so it's at an angle. Then we'll go to our behaviors with that rectangle selected. We'll go to basic motion and select motion path, and we can drag it from the top left to the bottom right, just like so. And it might be way too slow. You'll see we get this really slow shine over everything. Let's make it a bit faster. So right as everything is written on, that's when we want the sheen to appear. So let's select our motion path, push I to set the in point, and we can go forward about a second and then push O to set an out point. And now it flies across just like so. And finally, let's adjust the easing. I want this to decelerate. So it starts off really fast and then slows way down. And that is looking great. So you can adjust the duration of that animation by dragging out that motion path, but I'm really liking how that looks. So now that we've done all of the coloring and everything, we can re-enable our particles by coming over here to the leaf emitter on the left side. And again, that's going to tank performance, but it's looking really, really cool. And we can push Command S to save it so we can publish it over to Final Cut Pro. And we can just call this the Wreath animation. Then from there, we can go into our categories and throw it into my Patreon category or whatever category you personally want to work with. And I'm just going to throw this over into the titles theme as well. So with that lengthy process finished up, we can head over into Final Cut Pro and drag our Wreath animation down on the timeline. And if we push play, we can see how everything is elegantly animated for us in such a cool way. And the best part is we can come in and change this text to say anything we want. We can play it out and everything will work exactly the same. If this video was helpful to you, consider pressing that like button. Also, make sure you check out my Apple Motion Masterclass, which is linked down below with a huge discount for the end of the year.